is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it? I'm the Doctor. Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Alright dudes, it's time for another episode of It's Time to Rewind. I am known as Bubbawheat. Not the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who, and joining me 3 million years in the future, once again via the TARDIS, is my guest, Melinda from Hot Sets. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing today?
I am doing pretty good, and we are still in the main section of this season with the 2022 New Year's Eve special, Eve of the Daleks, with the 13th Doctor Jodie Whittaker. And on this episode, we are covering the 7th loop that starts at 45 minutes and 30 seconds, with the Doctor finding fireworks in the basement, and ends at 49 minutes and 19 seconds, with all 5 characters getting exterminated by 3 Daleks in the basement. So it's... I guess, before we jump into this loop, I did want to ask you, because, I mean, your podcast talks all about, fashion and the clothing. So let me ask you, what's your thoughts on the costume design in this episode? Like, I guess, especially like the 13th Doctor's outfit.
Yes. So I was looking at that a lot, and it was interesting as I mentioned last time, I did watch the first episode with Jodie Whittaker just to kind of prepare, because I don't have a history of watching Doctor Who, so I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about her version of the Doctor. And that first episode kind of ends with her establishing her outfit and setting that, this is going to be my outfit as the Doctor. So I was more aware of it. And there's something so interesting about trying to develop a costume for a character that is an alien, but in the form of a person. So I think there's, it gives you room to kind of experiment with stuff that is kind of maybe put together in a way that maybe is a little unexpected, or maybe looks a little bit odd to our normal fashion sense. So I feel like they kind of...
Yeah, I think a lot of times they try to go for the, mix of time periods as well. I think a lot of the previous Doctors have some element of their wardrobe that is kind of out of touch with time. Either, something a bit more Victorian. I know, like you mentioned, being familiar with David Tennant, I feel like his is a bit more, like, not quite Victorian, but there's a little bit of Victorian style, but he's also wearing Converse.
Right.
Sneakers.
Right. And I feel, especially, I feel like Converse is always like a shortcut to, this person's a little bit quirky. Like, that is like a really easy design choice to be like, this person's a little bit different, or like, this is modern, but maybe we're mixing in like some other clothing items that look a little bit more oldsy timesy. So I felt like I was wondering if maybe they were a little bit more 1980s inspired for Jodie's outfit. I don't know, because she does have this sort of graphic t-shirt with like the horizontal stripes, which always make me think of more like 1970s or maybe 1980s. And then the addition of having suspenders over the top. I feel like there was this trend in the 80s for these sort of casual suspenders look that doesn't really exist anymore. You don't really see young people on the street like wearing suspenders like attached to their casual outfits. And then I was really interested particularly in her coat because it's got this sort of beautiful, breezy quality to it. It's like a long sort of take on like a trench coat, but whatever fabric they used has this kind of beautiful movement. So when she's like running down the hallways and this episode in particular, it kind of like flows behind her. And to me, it kind of gives, maybe it sort of gives that kind of Victorian frock coat, but mixed with a trench coat kind of vibe. And then interestingly, it has a hood, which you don't often see. So I feel like they kind of took different things and mixed them together to make something that is recognizable to us, but it kind of makes her look a little bit different, like a little bit other than everybody else. So it was kind of an interesting thing to just like kind of be aware of as I was watching the episode. But yeah, I was very interested. I'd love to see that coat in person, because whatever fabric it was really nice. I feel very like textural. I like to touch clothing and costume pieces. So that coat is on my list of things that I would like to feel what the texture is in person.
Yeah, I didn't think too much about that coat, but yeah, looking at it, it does look pretty interesting and different. It's not like a Neo trench coat, from the Matrix.
Right.
Even though you do have Yaz wearing her little leather jacket too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and overall, I enjoyed. There's definitely a like sort of a bright, kind of fun quality to a lot of costumes I feel like I've seen in Doctor Who, like a lot of colors, and everyone seems to kind of have like their signature kind of style that they stick with in like different forms throughout the series. So yeah, I liked Yaz's coat. I really liked Sarah's kind of weird like leopard print sweater. It was very like modern. She had these like cool like star moon earrings as well that kind of, I think, gave her, kind of clued us in as the audience that that maybe she was wanting a little bit more. Like she was kind of having fun with her clothes in a way that's like someone who wants something in life rather than just wants to sit in the storage facility for the rest of her life, like waiting at the counter. So I feel like there was little clues to everyone's personality like peppered throughout that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, which we'll get to that in a little bit, and later on in this loop actually. Mm-hmm. But first we kind of kick off with the Doctor and company. It's taken them 6 full loops before they actually look at the boxes sitting right there in front of the TARDIS.
Right. I wanted to ask I noticed the TARDIS was like kind of like glowing, like kind of molten. And I didn't pay attention to that too much, I think, until this loop in particular. And I know that there's something going on with the TARDIS that is like kind of the cause of them getting stuck in this time loop, but I wasn't sure if maybe having like watched the previous episodes would have given me more information about like what's going on with the TARDIS in particular.
A little bit. They do have kind of a quick explanation at the very beginning. She references the flux, and that I guess that the TARDIS has been kind of damaged with the flux, which was basically the entire previous season.
Okay.
That just kind of concluded. But she says that she has to reset the TARDIS, and then as soon as they exit, then it has this molten look to it, and then we find out just a couple loops ago that the Daleks say that the TARDIS itself it's what's creating these time loops, and
right.
A previous guest has likened it to like a computer running updates, where sometimes it'll have to restart several times, and the first time it always takes a long time to restart, and then the second time it's a little bit quicker, and then if it has to restart a third or fourth time, then those go like pretty quick afterwards. So I think that's an appropriate explanation to why the TARDIS is kind of resetting time, and each one it gets a little bit shorter.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I don't think I would have thought of that on my own. That's perfect. like definitely is a nice like way of understanding what is going on here, what is happening, why are they trapped.
Yeah.
There's so much strange stuff in this storage facility. I don't know how much you've talked about it on previous episodes for this special, but there's so much weird stuff here in the storage facility.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic because it basically, Jeff is the sixth or seventh character if you include Sarah's mom, but Jeff is this unseen character, but he has so much personality just based on what we see and what's talked about him. Like even here, the doctor opens up the fireworks and she's like, "Oh, Jeff, you've been a bad boy."
Right. I was sort of like, Sarah, isn't it your job wouldn't you want to clear some of this stuff out to make room for other paying customers? Like I was a little
But
bit like...
I think it makes sense because Sarah is, she's kind of the de facto owner of this elf storage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she has zero interest in it.
Yeah, she really does.
She just does the bare minimum. And, this is like she's had it for at least 3 years. And this is really the first time she's actually looked at the storage units and what Jeff has been storing, and the fact that he has, like, literally it seems like Nick and Jeff are the only people that are storing anything in this facility.
I think so. I feel like Sarah could maybe, study business a little bit more. I feel like she could maybe make a little bit more profit if she cleared or at least consolidated some of these rooms down to make room. Maybe there's not more interest. Maybe there's not more potential customers out there, and Nick is the only person that really wants to rent a unit from her. But I don't know. It didn't seem like the best business model personally to not even know what is in your own facility. Although it does. It's kind of crucial for the plot of the episode for it to be that way. But.
Yeah, and there is the line early on where Sarah says to Nick, "You're my only customer," and it's tough to know if that's her being hyperbolic or if she's actually being saying the truth, because it kind of does seem like that's the truth, because all this other stuff in the storage facility is all Jeff's.
Yeah, I felt like I was sort of like, wait, so really Jeff he's gone. He is not coming back. He's not, he's not maintaining any
well, he
of
lives
this
there.
stuff. Well, no, true.
Because he has the one unit where the doctor goes into and so is like, is Jeff living here?
Oh, the whole room of those cans of beans. That was really, I was like, hats off to the props department for making or finding a million nondescript cans of like beef and beans. I was like, I don't really know where you get that, but that must have been kind of fun for the production staff to, especially like the props or the set decorators, to come up with all the stuff that's going to be in all these rooms. I would think that would be fun to do.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially like the taxidermy room and the party supply room.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And have you talked in previous episodes about Nick's storage needs in particular and his sort of
his
catalog? Yeah. Have you gotten to that much with your previous episodes?
Yeah. I talked about it, whenever we kind of, whenever we were in there and, they were discussing about him cataloging it, and it's like, these are all my, from my exes, and they're like, are they still alive?
Yeah, I was glad that question was asked, because I think that it needs to be clarified based on what he's doing. It's very, very particular. It's not something you see every day. So I thought that was really funny watching the episode with his little labels and his little catalog, and raising red flags for other characters, being like, Nick, what's going on? What's happening here?
Yeah, and then, but Here, back in this loop, the last time the Doctor ran off, and this time the Doctor sends Yaz away to go collect Nick and Sarah. And so we kind of have the other half of the conversation where Dan kind of sticks his big nose in where it doesn't belong and tells the Doctor about the Yaz's crush.
Yeah, that's so interesting knowing that that's not really gonna go very far in the rest of the series. It was kind of an interesting way to go about it, to have this sort of third party person be like, "Hey, by the way, this is going on. Are you aware? Did you know that this was happening between you and Yaz?" And but I appreciated, I don't know Dan's character obviously beyond this episode, but I appreciated his personality. He was very, I felt like he was pretty, I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for is. He seemed to kind of be more grounded and kind of have his head on his shoulders in this situation. So I thought he was a good,
even though he felt very middle school to me here, where, he's like one step short of, she likes you. She likes you.
No, it was a little bit like, check this box if you like her back vibe. But I did think it was kind of cute. So I was like, all right, we'll give it a pass. We'll go with charming for this interaction, and I didn't find it to be too cringy personally.
And I did notice, kind of just now, I feel like it's worth pointing out that this is the second time that Dan is just randomly carrying holding onto a box.
That's his role here, is just move box from A to B in every time loop, just pick something up and be useful and move it around. I feel like I recognize this actor from other things, but I couldn't quite place him. So I don't know if I've seen him do something else, but I felt like the sort of personality of well-meaning man seemed to be I associated that with other characters as well. So maybe I've seen him somewhere and don't remember, but I liked him. He also had the sort of the uniform of nice, well-meaning man, which is a plaid button-up shirt that's very neat and tidy. So he was coded to me as this is a nice, stable person right here. You can rely on Dan.
Yeah, good old Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we get Yaz kind of running across reception, and then, once again we have the Dalek appearing in the middle of the reception, and yet, we don't see it, but apparently Nick and Sarah managed to get out of reception, and we see them on the 5th floor in the green explosives room, apparently.
As we all, don't we all have a explosives room somewhere in our lives? We all have that in storage, don't we? Very normal. Is there so do the Daleks think? Do they think that they just have to keep showing up and killing everyone until the loop collapse, or is there any way, is there a way that they could sort of end this time loop before they run out of time? Is there any way, if they killed everyone in the loop, that wouldn't just end it, right? They have to see it all the way through.
Yeah, from their perspective, they're waiting out the time loop because they're also relatively intelligent, so they understand that the time loop is decreasing by a minute each iteration. So they imagine that once it gets down to 1 minute, and then that they will be out of, they'll come through on the other end, and just so long as they kill everybody on that last loop, then they think they'll be the victors, because the TARDIS is kind of this all-powerful spaceship. Right.
And that was something, not being super familiar with the show, that I was obviously I know what Daleks are. I've heard of them. I know that they're sort of a big bad enemy in the show, but I was kind of wondering how frequently they show up, if they're, just sort of are they just a plot plot in sort of big episodes or like end of seasons or specials like this, or are they sort of like at any time they could show up as like a threat to the Doctor?
Yeah, they're kind of scattered. You know,
Okay.
they pop up, roughly once a season.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, but I believe at this point, I think they may have shown up in Flux because this seems to be like retaliation for something that that's Jodie Whittaker's Doctor had done to them recently. But I think that they kind of held off on the Daleks for most of Jodie Whittaker's run.
Oh wow.
But I could be wrong. But in New Who, they tend to pop up at least once a season, often as like the season closer.
Okay. Yeah. I did read sort of like, yeah, I had a sense that from watching this and then a little bit that I did read that, yeah, it seemed to be like whatever happened in the previous episode, this was them being like, we're going to come specifically and attack you in retaliation for something. But I don't know what she did in the previous one to make them so very angry. But must have been bad, although they seem pretty evil. So I don't know how much you have to really anger them for them to want to kill you.
Well, it seems like about every other time that the Doctor deals with the Daleks, it ends with the complete genocide of the Dalek race. And yet they end up, they apparently didn't kill all of them, or, because they also have time travel that's, some aspect of Daleks survived and rebuild their population, because they're also kind of like space Nazis, because they're all about the genetic perfection of the Dalek form, which is this like little bubbly mass inside of this exosuit.
Yeah, nothing says genetic perfection like a little bubbly mass. That's not quite what I think of. So I guess they're sort of like like certain like weeds where if you don't get all the roots out, they're just going to grow back or something like that, where if you don't get every single one, they can regenerate and find you again, I guess. Seems pretty scary.
Yeah, pretty much.
Seems pretty scary. I would not want to come up against them personally. And
yet, they don't look like they could even climb stairs. It just, they seem very bulky and unwieldy, and
yeah. That seems like that would be a detriment to them in this particular episode, since it's at least 5 stories tall with a basement that they're going to have to send, they're going to have to regenerate on each floor, because I don't see them going up and down the stairs, and they seem to want to disable that elevator pretty fast. So I don't know how they're getting
technically
around.
They can levitate, but, for the longest time, whenever they were, practical effects, for the longest time, it was kind of the joke that's, the best way to get away from a Dalek is just to go downstairs.
I mean, that seems pretty effective. Yeah, as long as you can get down the stairs and around like a corner away from their sort of like laser blast beam. Yeah, so it's sort of like you can foil a Dalek in that sense the same way you can foil like a Roomba. Like it can't follow you from floor to floor.
Yeah. Yeah, and then jumping back to the loop, yes. And with Nick and Sarah, this is kind of the payoff for the shot that we saw at the very beginning, where we saw that the place was named Elf Storage, and so we get the explanation. And again, I think this goes back to Sarah as someone that's doing just the bare minimum, where she mentions that the S fell off years ago and it was just titled the very basic self-storage, but now it's elf storage.
I really liked that joke, because I just kind of assumed that, I mean, obviously being kind of a holiday special, elf is like a cute little name, but that revelation that the S had just fallen off, I was like, hats off. That is a good joke. I appreciate that. I enjoyed that probably maybe a little more than I should have, but I thought that was a pretty good joke.
And we also get I feel like this, especially since I've been going through, New Who myself. I feel like the holiday specials are almost always companionless, like not always, but often. And it tends to be the Doctor interacting with a person who could potentially be a perfect companion for him. But then they either end up dying or going off on, having their own happy ending. And I feel like Sarah is kind of the quintessential, potential companion, because she has this moment where she talks about how, she's kind of the stuck here due to family obligations because she, I guess, inherited it from her uncle. And, she's the kind of the only one running it, but she has dreams of traveling the world, which that feels like the perfect potential companion for the Doctor that can go anywhere in time and space. And she ends up, just traveling the world with Nick. Spoiler for the end of this episode.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of like a bait and switch where you might think like, oh, they're gonna set up like maybe Yaz is gonna leave and maybe Sarah. I don't know exactly how the changeover between companions usually works, but I think you could definitely have interpreted that way watching episode, but since maybe because I don't have as much familiarity with the series, I did kind of think like, oh, her and Nick are gonna go off and travel. Although I was sort of wondering how is Sarah gonna afford all this travel when Nick is her only customer and he's gonna be with her. So I assume she's just gonna close the storage at that point because her only customer is gonna be gone. So in that way, she really will be free if they can make it out of the time loop.
Yeah, potentially try to collect the insurance, but that's unlikely considering that it was destroyed by an explosive device.
I know. It's like I don't really know how insurance in England works, obviously, but I feel like here in the US you probably wouldn't get a payout because the like arson investigators would come and pretty quickly figure out what had happened. I guess maybe you could claim it was an accident, but since there's not supposed to have explosives in the building, that seems like a hard claim to get past the insurance company. So I don't know what's in Sarah's future.
Or just the, whatever profit by selling the land.
Yeah, I suppose so. So, hopefully it's enough to for her and Nick to take a nice lavish world tour.
But then this loop basically ends with the Doctor kind of explaining her plan for the decoy loop, which I think it's a good plan. I like the concept of it. The only thing that I don't like is that we never really see them discussing the plan. They're discussing the idea, the concept of a plan, and then. I didn't jump ahead. It's been a little bit since I watched the last two loops, but I feel like the next two loops are them just executing this plan that they never actually discussed.
Yeah, that is true. I was a little bit, I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't have the strategic brain to escape a time loop myself, but I was kind of surprised that the plan would be to have this decoy loop. That's definitely something that I would not have ever thought of. So I was sort of just trying to wrap my head around, what that would be and what you could set up to kind of trick the Daleks to do that would help you the next time. But yeah, I was a little unclear on exactly what they were going to trick the Daleks into doing. And I still felt a little bit unclear after watching what they ended up doing. So I don't know, maybe I don't have the strategic brain to get out of the time loop or something, but I was a little bit unclear on what exactly, like you said, like they talked about the fact they were going to do it, but I was a little bit unclear on how what they ended up doing helped them ultimately. So I maybe I just need to watch it one more time and really think about it. But I had a little bit of a hard time understanding what the outcome, like how that outcome helped them the next time, other than just making the Daleks maybe just go to the wrong place in the building. I'm not sure.
Yeah, again, this is kind of going from memory because I haven't watched the last two loops in a few weeks at this point. But I believe that that the idea is for them to make the Daleks think that they need something from the fifth floor, that they need the explosives from the fifth floor, and they're going to exit through the basement, which is kind of half right. And so in the last loop, I believe that they tricked the Daleks to thinking that the Daleks are going to cut them off in the basement where they don't have anything to stop them, but they have explosives in the basement already that they can set up in less than a minute.
Yeah, okay, so maybe it is helpful because obviously they need the Daleks to be in the basement to a certain extent for what their ultimate plan with the fireworks is. So maybe they do need they need at least one Dalek to regenerate in the basement, it would seem like, in order to execute their final plan. So yeah, I guess maybe it's sort of like a follow me guys, I'm going to the fifth floor, and but with the knowledge that they still need at least like some Dalek presence in the basement. So yeah, this is another situation where I'm like, I would like to see it kind of like mapped out of like where everybody regenerates, like where the Daleks go, and sort of kind of see the movements of everyone through each loop. I think would be really interesting to like look at it like a flow chart or something that shows me like where everybody goes.
Yeah, and then this loop kind of ends on a lighter note, because this is kind of the hope, because the Doctor and they all have a plan for what they're doing. So even though they know they're going to die in this moment, they're still kind of playing it light because they think that they have the upper hand now. And I do love the moment where the Doctor points at her wrist and she's like, "Oh, you're late," but I don't like as much that she kind of hangs the hat on it and she says, "I'm not even wearing a watch. I'm just doing it for effect."
Yeah. I think it would have definitely been a little bit more subtle if she didn't point it out. Like those of us watching would notice that she's not wearing a watch. But it was sort of a.
Yeah, I feel like that joke was done much better in Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, where he has. Where Dr. Horrible has a line at one part where he says, "Oh goodness, look at my wrist. I gotta go."
Absolutely. Yes, that is a good joke. I forgot about that. Yeah, and I think as long as you're like, you get your arm in frame, we can clearly see there's no watch. And yeah, also like sometimes people like maybe I'm weird, but sometimes I will kind of like point to my wrist referencing something being late, and I don't wear a watch. So I feel like it's sort of like a symbol or a signal, even if you don't wear a watch, that like the understanding is that you could be pointing to a watch. But like I said, maybe I'm just weird. I don't know.
Yeah, and then at the end of this loop, like at the end of every loop, they all die.
Yes. Yeah, I guess that's true. I think my previous question of if there was a way to end the loop early, I guess it doesn't really hold water because they do all die in this loop and regenerate. So yeah, I don't know. I guess there's really no way for the Daleks to end the time loop prematurely. They just have to like see it through and trap them with the last like minute of time that they have. in their, that's their strategy anyway.
Yeah, the Dalek strategy is just persistence. If they keep doing it, then eventually the time loop will stop, and as long as they're killing them in every loop, then they will have killed them in the last loop as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's good advice. I mean, whenever you read like listicles about like how to be successful, persistence is always one of the top qualities that you should have. So.
And then that's all I have for this loop. Did you have anything else about this loop or this episode or Doctor Who as a whole, I guess?
Yeah, I was really glad to kind of have like a push to watch Doctor Who. I've sort of been aware of it as it's progressed and it came back, but I really hadn't kept up with it. But it was nice to sit down and have like a reason to just watch a couple episodes, and I think it kind of maybe sparked an interest for me to like watch it a little bit more instead of just sort of being aware of it in the background as like this giant long running sci-fi property, because sometimes I feel like that can be a little intimidating where you're like, oh, I don't know, can I like jump into this thing that existed for decades? Like, how could I possibly like kind of catch up with everybody and like learn enough about it without like becoming like really obsessed? So it was really nice to have a reason to sit down and watch a little bit of it, and I think maybe I'll watch some more in the future.
Yeah, I was pretty much the same way myself, because I watched this whenever it came out because I, like you, I was asked to guest on somebody else's podcast because, when this came out, I had started doing this podcast. I think I was in the middle of Groundhog Day for the first season. And so they asked me to come on, and then that kind of prompted me to start with, Christopher Eccleston and, the start of the new Doctor Who, and I watched through the first two seasons, and then I got distracted and kind of took a year or two break, and then as I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do for this season of this podcast, I decided to do British sci-fi, and that kind of encouraged me to jump back into it, and so I've been jumping back, watching it again, and so like since doing this, I've kind of gone through David Tennant's second season through, I'm almost finished with Matt Smith, so it's still been kind of slow, but it's been fun, and I've been enjoying it, and I think those David Tennant and Matt Smith are, they definitely have some strong runs of episodes in there. They have some weak ones in there. But they got some strong runs, and I've covered a lot of good episodes for this season as a whole as well, and I really enjoyed, even though kind of like this one, I kind of watched it on its own without as much background information, but Peter Capaldi's kind of time loop episode that I covered for him, that was a really great one, and kind of a highlight of this project as a whole. As we're recording this, that's kind of the next one that's going to be released. But yeah, this whole thing has been fun, and Doctor Who is definitely good, and and most people recommend to start out with Christopher Eccleston and kind of go from there. But even then, that's still 13 seasons of TV.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think sometimes when there's that much of something, it can, it kind of makes you go like, oh, I don't know if I can commit to, because the danger is if it's really good, then you have to watch all of it. That can be it can be a lot. But I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, something that I think kind of kept Doctor Who in the back of my mind was I was a really big fan of Community when that show was on, and the sort of spoof of Doctor Who on there, the Inspector Space-Time spoof that Troy and Abed watch and are really obsessed with on the show, kind of kept I feel like it kind of kept my like awareness of Doctor Who in the back of my head, like, oh yeah, that's what they're referencing on Community. And I had rewatched that show not too terribly long ago and was like, oh yeah, they're really into this like fake Doctor Who show on Community. So that was, I think, like the sort of like cultural impact of Doctor Who kind of keeps it sort of present, I think, in all of our like awareness of pop culture, even if you haven't watched all of it like me.
Yeah. But thanks again for joining me on these past 2 weeks. And once again, why don't you take a moment and to let people know about where else they can find you online?
Sure. So yeah, I host a podcast called Hot Set, Haute, because what's better than a visual pun in an audio medium? So I host that show with my friend and colleague Ariel. We're both theater costume designers and technicians, and our podcast is a movie podcast where we talk specifically about costumes, but we try to talk about them in context of the story, because costumes are just one visual storytelling tool that you can use in TV and film and theater to express your characters and build the world around you. So we like to get into all the weird little details and moments and stuff that we see when we watch movies. And for anyone interested, our first season was called 100 Years of Sci-Fi. So we covered one science fiction movie from every decade from the 1920s to the 2010s. And our second season is millennial nostalgia movies. And our third season, which is happening now, is about more audacious design, and it's called The Color Explosion. So if anyone's interested in looking us up, we're on all the major podcast platforms, and you can find us on Instagram and Threads.
Yeah, and I've definitely listened to a handful of episodes, and I think it's a great show. It's worth listening to, and it's a nice new, a different angle from, all the hundreds of other film podcasts out there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was definitely like, there's so many out there. So I feel like you have to really think about, what can I say that is going to be unique? Because, yeah, there's a million movie podcasts that people could listen to. So if people want to hear nerdy stuff about costumes, they can come our way.
And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on social media everywhere where I'm at Bubbawheat. These days, I am most active on Threads, but I also have a presence on most of the other social media platforms. So if you decide to @ me on anywhere you find me, I will most likely respond as long as you're saying something nice. And we also have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes as they come out, and also be informed of what time loop movie or TV show I will be covering in future seasons. And I occasionally also I think, I guess it's slowly coming up, as we're getting to the end of this season, I probably will put a vote on what movie I will be covering for the next season. So if you want to join in on that, be sure to join the Facebook group. And until next time, smoke me a kipper, and I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.